Hi guys, Aaron here with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns, and today up for review we have the Canik METE SF in 9mm. So let's talk about it. First things first, we're going to go safe and clear on this guy just to make sure all of our safety checks have been met. So now that we have that clear, full disclosures, Canik did not send me this firearm. I purchased this firearm myself. It was actually a special order, and it cost me $480 even. Now, if you're new to the channel, we're going to go through the gun the way I always go through the gun here, which is front to back, top to bottom, talking about the features and caveats of those features as I go. And there are a few on this gun today. So, the gun comes with all the typical accoutrements that come with a new firearm. You get your hard case, spare magazine. The Canik actually comes with a holster. It comes with a magazine loader, and it comes with a little keychain with a little tool on it for various things like your optics plate, so you can install your optics, and your additional magazine well extension that it comes with, which is really nice, and we'll talk about that later on. So, starting at our sights. Our sights are squared off except for the rear, which has a true swooping U-notch shape to it. Equal height, equal light is easy to achieve, and I had no issues with the sights themselves, except for when it comes to sighting systems later on. So the front sight has a nice large white dot on it, and I'll insert some footage here for you. And then the rear sight has two smaller white dots. It has serrations at the front here, and it has a nice hard ledge on it, as you can see right here, so you can rack that gun off of belts, boots, or any hard surfaces. Now, also on the top of the firearm here, you have a loaded chamber indicator, which is found right here, and it just pops up when you have a round in the chamber, so it's visual and tactile. Now, moving back from there, we do have an optics cut on the METE series. This is standard across the METE series, whether it's the SFX, SFT, or the SF, which is what I chose to go with. Now, the SF is slightly smaller, it's got a slightly shorter barrel, and it has a slightly shorter grip, so it holds a few less rounds, but overall, it's the compact model of the METEs, and it is really nice to carry. So, the optics cut comes with two different plates. It has one for an SMS shield pattern, and then it has one for an RMR pattern. Now, during my review, I actually did mount a Swamp Fox Sentinel, which is an SMS pattern footprint on this guy, and it worked quite well, no issues with it. However, what I will say was there was an issue with the sighting system. As much as these sights look like they're hired to co-witness with an optic, and while Canik says, yes, your iron sights will co-witness with your optic, it's not exactly true. So the reason for that is if you have an optic on this guy, you don't get a true co-witness that I would prefer, like a lower 1/3 or lower 1/4. You get a lower 1/5, and again, I'll insert an image here to show you what I'm talking about. The problem with that is you can just barely see the tops of your iron sights through your optic. You can use them, but in my preference, it's way too low. So if you're running an optic and it goes down, you have two choices in that scenario. Put the threat in the window and just squeeze the trigger until the threat is stopped. Or you can try and revert to your iron sights, but because they're so low, you have to be very mindful of that. You have to focus very hard in order to put good shots downrange with it. I would prefer taller sights, and here's where things get complicated. The front sight is a Smith & Wesson M&P cut. The rear sight is a Glock cut. Now, you could potentially get yourself some suppressor height iron sights for those particular firearms and put them on here, but dimensionally things are different. When I was researching the firearm in order to replace these sights, because I really like the firearm and I plan on keeping it, I found that different front sights may not work with different rear sights based on their heights and the options available through those manufacturers. So what you end up needing to do to make it work is you need to find the overall specs to the overall specs, as in the height for the front sight and the rear sight. Once you find the overall height for both of those, you can then go online to whatever retailer you prefer and find the front and rear sight for the M&P and the Glock. And then you have to kind of get the difference in overall height correct, because the front sight is shorter than the rear sight. So you need to find a front sight that mimics that dimension, just slightly taller, and then a rear sight that mimics that dimension, again just slightly taller, so that the difference in height between the front sight and the rear sight is the same difference as the front night sight and the rear sight, right? In order to get your elevation properly adjusted. It is a huge pain, and I spent hours researching it and trying to figure out what to do until I came across a company called Night Vision. Night Vision produces night sights, that's all they do, and they actually are the only manufacturer at the time of this recording that offers a complete set for the Canik METE series. So I would just go through them. The sights are about $110. Shipping is free when they have sales. I think you have to pay for shipping the rest of the time, but shout out to Night Vision, because they're literally the only company that's making a complete set of suppressor height night sights for the Canik METEs. With that all out of the way, let's move down to our barrel. So our barrel here does not actually have a crown on it. It is truly a flat cut, not even a rounded crown to it, which is something that I would like to see, is a match grade crown on this guy. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with it, but for $480, you can't get everything you want. Moving back from there, you do have your front slide serrations. Now, normally I'm not a fan of the front slide serrations because of the fact that it drives the cost of manufacture up, and it encourages you to put your hand near the muzzle, which is never a good idea. However, that being said, I don't necessarily mind it on a firearm if it has the optics cut. If you're using a smaller optic on this guy, it's not going to interfere with your manipulation via the rear slide serrations. If you're using a larger one, it could potentially do so. So having the front slide serrations is actually kind of a good idea on their part. You do have some lightning cuts that go all the way down on both sides, and you do have some trapezoidal style cuts on the top to reduce weight. Now, the rear slide serrations are almost the exact same pattern as the front. Obviously, the front slide serrations are a little different because of that scalloping, but on the rear you can see that the depth and the distance between each serration is the same, and the slide serrations are excellent. You get good traction on them, both front and rear, and it makes the firearm very easy to manipulate and chamber that round, or clear your malfunctions if you need to. Now, below that, on the front, you have a 3-slot pick rail right here for your lights, lasers, that kind of thing. I did run an old SIG tack light on this guy, as well as a Streamlight TLR1HL and the TLR7X, which I really like on this guy. No issues, the lockup was tight. And by the way, mini review for the TLR7X, I put all 500 rounds of ammunition through this gun during my testing with that mounted and the light turned on, and it functioned flawlessly. So there you go, mini review for that. Moving back from here, you do have a little bit of stippling here, which creates a nice memory pad that your index finger can reach no problem. And I did find myself using it. It is really handy to have there versus some manufacturers where you might have a reference point that is just kind of blended in or whatever. They actually stippled it, so it was a bit of an improvement over a lot of their competitors. Moving back from there, you have your disassembly tabs. They have a couple of horizontal serrations on them, and they're very much squared off and easy to actuate. They're right there if you're curious. Moving back from there, you have an ambidextrous slide release. Again, it has some horizontal serrations to it, and it's slightly flared out from the frame. And I don't have an issue with it whatsoever. When going to lock back, when reloading or anything like that, you can reach it without changing your grip whatsoever, whether you're left-handed or right-handed. So they are pretty good. I'd like to see them to be flared out a little more aggressively than they are, but all in all, they're pretty good. Moving back from there, you do have a generous beaver tail that you can see right here. Ergonomics on the gun are really good, and I did enjoy shooting it a lot. Moving further back, on the back plate, you have a loaded, not a loaded chamber indicator, you have a striker indicator, which will disappear when you pull the trigger, and then the gun will cycle and it will pop back out. Not exactly a necessary feature, but a nice one if you're looking for those smaller touches. Moving down, you do have your trigger guard, which has a nice double undercut on it, and it's very much squared off. It has some serrations on the front that you can see right there. And if you want to hook your support hand index finger around it to shoot, like some people do, you can do that. However, if you have a weapon weight mounted, it's going to interfere with that. Your first undercut is right here for your support hand, and it did work quite well for me. And then your most important undercut is right here, and as you can see, it's very high up, and again, it adds to the overall ergonomics of the pistol, and it makes it really comfortable in the hand and really fun to shoot. Moving back, you do have your magazine release. It's on the left side since I'm a right-handed shooter. Again, very squared off. It's checkered. It's slightly recessed, but protrudes enough where you can easily actuate it. I did find myself breaking my grip slightly to drop the magazine. Not the end of the world, and I'm sure if you went to a company like Unrivaled Technologies or somebody like that, you could find an extended magazine release button for this guy, but the stock one is highly functional. You do have some scalloping right here in the grip for your index finger, and again, it works quite well. Again, very comfortable pistol. Now moving down, we have our front strap. Our front strap, as you can see right here, is laser stippled, and it's quite good right there. On the side panels, you do, of course, have your the exact same stippling on the side, and it adds a little traction. Now, the gun comes with two back straps, and they're interchangeable. Here is your back strap right there, and as you can see, it has this squared texturing on it. It is a little less aggressive than I'd like to see. I'd like to see, I like the square pattern, but I'd like to see that pattern to be more aggressive like you would see on a CZ P10C or a Glock Gen 4, Gen 5. Because when it comes to traction on your grip, the front strap and the rear strap are the most important areas. And while the front strap is adequate, I found the back strap to be just a little bit too smooth and a little bit inadequate. Very small gripes on this gun, guys. Moving down from there, you do have your magazine well. It is beveled all the way around, and again, the gun comes with an additional flared magazine well adapter that you can attach via the bottom of the back strap with a torque screw, and you can see it right there. So let me get you a good clean shot of the standard magazine well as well as the flared one, and you can see the difference. So if you look in there, you can actually see where that additional flared magazine well attachment meets the standard mag well. And as you can see, the standard mag well is flared all the way around, and it's quite nice, but this attachment actually helps in a lot of regards. It obviously widens your magazine well, which assists in your reloads, and you do have this nice finger extension on the bottom that fits the hand really well, and again, aids with its overall ergonomics and aids with managing your recoil. So I actually am a big fan. It made reloads on this guy go lightning fast. And again, it helps with the recoil mitigation. And unlike some firearms manufacturers that provide an enlarged flared magazine well attachment, a lot of times what you see with those is the standard base plates fit deeper into the magazine well than they should, and you end up having to use an extended magazine in order to take full advantage of it. This isn't the case with Canik. Canik did this perfectly, where if I tilt the gun ever so slightly, you can see that the base plate of the magazine protrudes past the magazine well attachment that they've provided. And what that means is, rather than inserting a magazine and then kind of having to depress it with your thumb or something to get it in there, the standard base plates extend past it, so you can simply press the magazine in like you normally would, and it fits and locks in, no issues. So you're not finagling that to get it in there. It just pops right in very naturally. The magazines are Canik branded magazines. They could be manufactured by somebody else like Mechgar, but it's not printed like that. And the standard magazine capacity for the SF is 15 rounds. I had no issues with the magazines, and they worked just flawlessly. So let's talk about our reliability. Oh, no, can't do that. First of all, let's talk about Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Link in the description if you want to support the channel with the little things, targets, ammunition, gas to get to the range dues, that kind of stuff. I would really appreciate it. Patreon's a monthly subscription, and you can go as little as $1 a month, and buy me a coffee. It has small increments, and they're one-time donations. So if you got a couple bucks lying around that you can donate to the channel, I'd appreciate it. Again, link in the description. Let's talk about our trigger on the Canik METE. Well, if you watch my review on the Canik TP9SA that I did, it had a phenomenal trigger, and I really enjoyed it. And it's really no different on the METE. So you do have vertical striations on the front of the trigger, which help with traction and memory for good trigger placement. You do have a blade safety right there that you can see is red. And the trigger itself, again, quite good. So let's get right into that. So as you can see right here, you got just a slight bit of that take up, 4 or 5 millimeters. Then you start hitting a wall. Then you've got a spongy wall right here, slightly spongy, not bad. And then you have a pretty clean break, literally at 4 pounds. It's a 4-pound trigger. It is phenomenal. And I'll show you that one more time just so you can get a feel for it. First trigger pull is going to go something like this, and then your 4-pound break. Now, reset on this guy is also really good. It's short, it's crisp, it's light, and it pushes your finger forward with just enough tension. So you get that kind of forced reset to it, and it's right there. It's short, again, crisp, it's tactile, it's audible. It's actually a really, really good trigger, which Canik is now known for. So let's talk about reliability. So the reliability on this guy was phenomenal. The standard testing that I do for any firearm here is 500 rounds. If it can go 500 rounds, I allot for 1 failure. So if it goes 500 rounds and only has 1 failure, in that 500 rounds, it passes. If it's 2 or more, it fails. This firearm had 499 rounds through it out of the 500 without the malfunction, and 1 which was a malfunction. However, it was not the firearm's fault. That round was out of spec, and I'll insert a picture of it right here so you can see it, but it obviously wasn't loaded properly. The case was deformed and cracked, and so it was a failure to go into battery due to a bad round. So this, again, if that round wasn't out of spec, it would have went through all 500 rounds, I have no doubt. So it passed the reliability standard, and I would have no qualms about carrying this gun when it comes to reliability. So let's talk about accuracy. And again, I'm going to insert some photos here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But at 7 yards standing, which is how all the accuracy is done for handguns on this channel, 1-inch groups were pretty easy to achieve. Inch and an inch and a half was typically what I saw, even when I was firing pretty quickly due to that phenomenal trigger. And I mean, again, look at the photos and you can see there were a few instances where I was able to put 7 or 8 rounds through the same hole, 7 yards standing. Accuracy is phenomenal. Again, very much mirroring Canik's past quality of their firearms. So the gun is extremely accurate, extremely reliable. It has great ergonomics. It has good sights. However, again, if you're going to run an optic, I would recommend you head over to Night Vision and get those suppressor height night sights for this guy. Disassembly, reassembly is a little bit different than a Glock, and unfortunately, I'm not allowed to show that on YouTube anymore. However, it's a pretty simple process. You simply will pull the slide to the rear slightly, and then you can push your disassembly tabs down. And rather than the slide coming completely off of the frame, what happens is it moves forward a little bit and it just pops off. Then you can remove your double captive recoil spring in your barrel, service the weapon, put it back together in the exact opposite order. You know, your barrel, your recoil spring assembly, drop the slide back on, pull it to the rear, and release just like you're racking it, and it locks back into place. Quality on the internals, I'll get you a picture of that right here as well. Obviously, the quality is very high, again, to be expected from Canik. In fact, these guns are becoming more and more popular in the firearm market, to the point where even Taryn Butler over at Taryn Tactical Innovations has done a collaboration with Canik to do a custom model, and I'd love to get my hands on one of those. I don't know if I'm ever going to do it or if I'm going to be able to afford to, but it is a really nice version of that firearm. So if Taryn Butler is saying it's good, and he is a bit of a gun snob, it's got to be pretty dang good. I think that about covers everything about the Canik. It was a quick review. I had a lot of fun doing this. I plan on keeping this, and if you're interested in getting something just a little bit different than your Glock or Glock clone, I would highly, highly recommend the Canik METE SF. This has been Aaron with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns. You guys have a nice day.